It was another village scene. I will shoot you in the water. They'd heard about a baptism. A group of our young people went out and they were determined to run a program because there was civil unrest. There was fighting. They had guns. They were angry with each other. And our youth said there's only one way to solve this problem of tribal fighting or warfare. We should bring Jesus to the community. And so the group of our youth went up to run a program in one of the villages in inland. And a young lady came along to that program and she was very excited about what she was learning and what she had heard. Her dad was a militant and he was a heathen. He was an animist and they hated anything to do with Christianity because Christianity was white man stuff and they didn't like it at all. And she said to her parents that she wanted to be a Christian and they were angry. They weren't going to have it. And the father said to her that he would shoot her while she was in the water. Well, the program went on. These youth ran this program and the time for us to have a district meeting was getting closer and closer and I knew nothing about this story until we got up there and we had a baptism. And this young lady came and she wanted to be baptized. She was baptized. It was a fantastic day. Then they told me the story about her dad. The kid went home. Now, I was going to bring a replica with me this morning, but Hazel said, if you get caught with that, you'll be in trouble. But you know what a machete is? Well, you know what a machete and a half is? And you know what 2 machetes are? Well, he had a great long knife. And he went down to his young girl and he said, you Christian now? You Christian? And she looked at him and she said, Papa, me Christian and me happy to mas. I am very happy to be a Christian. He said, I told you that I would kill you if you were Christian. Obviously, this Christianity business means more to you than life itself. And she listened. Then he took out the knife. I tell you, if Christianity means that much to you, if ever you leave it, if ever you deny it, if ever you run away from it, I will chop you with a knife. Whew. What did we talk about last time? Remember Esther? Remember Esther 1? Party, wealth, power, divorce, fundamentalism, but no God. God is not seen. Chapter 2, there's a beauty contest. The whole world is involved. And they pick Miss Universe and sure, there's Esther 1. And at the end of the chapter, there's an assassination attempt. Somebody wants to kill the king. Mordecai hears about it, reports it. They're found guilty. They're executed. It's written down in the history books and forgotten about. Where's God? Not there. Chapter 3. The villain is introduced. And the villain is angry when he finds out who this Mordecai fellow is over something that happened 400 years before. And he's mad. He cannot be satisfied. He's a pagan. He's a sun worshipper. He's an astrologer, not astronomer. He's an astrologer. And in this chapter, we see a Sunday worship. We see a time of trouble for God's people. We see a union of church and state to try to silence this people. A death decree goes out. And Mordecai weeps his heart out over this whole affair. He's terribly upset because of what has happened. Esther hears about it and sends a message. Now we get to chapter 4 where we pick up today. Chapter 4. Esther hears of Mordecai's behavior and says, what's going on? Why all this trouble? And he sends back to her and tells her the story. And he also tells her that you can't escape this problem. Being in the palace is not going to hide you. We're all going to suffer, but God will bring deliverance from somewhere. God will save his people. Now we see the real beauty of Esther. And I want you to take your Bible to Esther chapter 4 and have a look at verses 15 to 17. 15 to 17. And notice Esther's reaction to her cousin's request. Go before the king, go in. This is the very thing that had caused the divorce, the sacking of Vashti, the queen before her. Go and gather all the Jews and fast for me 3 days. Do you see God in this? Well, you don't see his face, do you? Go and fast for me. But the real beauty of Esther is now to appear. Esther is a type of Christ. Esther is the saviour of her people. She prepares, and she is prepared to die if that will save her people. Because these next few words are not frivolous. If I perish, I perish. See there at the end of verse 15? If I perish, I perish. Moses came to that experience in his life. God said, Moses, just stand aside and let me at them. Let me at them. I'm going to destroy this people, and I'm going to raise up of you a people that are worthy to go into the promised land. What did Moses say? Lord, take my name off the book and save these people. Would you do that for Newcastle? Would I do that for Wallsend? Take my name and take them to the promised land. Do you have that sort of faith in God? Take my name out and put their name in. That's trust. That's belief. That's confidence. That's the real beauty of Esther in this story. All right, Esther fasted for 3 days. And now I'm going to drop down to tradition for a moment, because it said she looked so pale and wan. When she went in there to see the king, she was pale and wan, and she wanted to see. And he grabbed the golden rod and scepter, whatever you like to call it, and held it out and said, Esther, what's the matter? What's going on? And she came in. Does God give people supernatural strength in times of need, times of oppression, death decrees, or whatever? You know, I'd like to suggest that God uses ordinary people. He may inspire them with inspired thoughts, but he uses ordinary people to do enormous tasks. You see, Jesus fasted before he went in and did battle with the enemy. Esther fasted before she went in to do battle with the enemy. And I'd like to assure us today that God never left Esther at all at any time, and neither will he leave us. Take away the fear that we have tried to generate so often. You know, when we read these stories of death decrees and Sunday laws and all this type of thing in the book of Revelation, so often we've held them over people to frighten them. Love casts out fear. Where do they fit? I would call it religious abuse to try to frighten people into heaven. All right, let's come back to this one here again. Will God intervene? I said Esther looked pale and wan. She went in there to see the king. And when she went in to see the king, he held out the rod. Come to dinner. Come and let's have a little time together. Let's have dinner. Oh, and by the way, bring Haman with you. And so they had the party. Now we go down a little bit further. God does not give supernatural ability. He relies on us. In fact, I have a phrase that most of us would have perhaps heard before. It says, more surely or absolutely positively is there a place prepared for you to work on earth for God than there's a place prepared for you in heaven. Do you really think God's got a place for you here? More surely, it says, God has people he can trust. He could trust Esther. Years later, there was another young lady that he could trust with his son, Mary. I would like to bring to us encouragement today to say that we have nothing to fear for the future except we forget the way the Lord has dealt with his people in the past. We have nothing to fear. Now then, today we run into another problem, and I see this quite often, and I see it often with young people. And that is, you have to be to a certain standard before you can be saved. Or you have to be a certain standard before probation closed, then you're going to live without a mediator and all these type of things. In other words, you've got to be sinless, and I haven't met anyone that's attained to it. Have you? So I'd like to take another quote for anyone that's battling with this sort of thing, because it says here in a little book called Selected Messages, my brethren, well, I would put my brethren, my sisters, my family, listen to this. You are expecting that you must be free from sin before you trust his power to save. Listen, if this is the struggle going on in your mind, I fear you will gain no strength and will finally become discouraged. So how do we come to him? Come to him as you are. Come to him now. Come to him, warts and all, or scars and all. Let's go down to chapter 5. Come to dinner. All right, Mordecai came to dinner. There's Haman, yeah, don't worry if I get them mixed up. You know what I meant, didn't you? It was only my wife came up at me. Haman came to dinner. And Haman is so excited at getting to this dinner. There's something that has not changed in the last 2,500 years that I know of. And that is, a way to the man's heart is through his mouth, through his stomach. Esther, come to dinner. Haman, come to dinner. They had dinner and Haman went home. Now listen to this Haman fella. Everybody recognizes my greatness. I am the greatest. And you'll notice all the I ams. You'll see them again over in Ezekiel. They started in heaven with somebody that was rebelling against God. In Babylon, again, we see the downfall of Babylon, the I ams. The pride. Well, here we see this fella. I am. I'm recognized by the Queen. I am the greatest. I'm the Prime Minister. I'm the boss of the world. I'm the richest man in the world. I'm dancing with the stars. Until he saw Mordecai. And there his anger just flooded over. I'll kill that. And he went home and told his family how rich he was, how good he was, and his wife said, listen, let me give you some medicine. Before you go to dinner tomorrow, make a gallows. Set up a gallows. Is that one up there, Dale? Set up a gallows. I'd like to ask us today, why do people hate religion or God through religion so much? Why do people hate religion so much? I was in a surgery one day, and the older I get, the more often I seem to go and visit them. I went there this week and they did something in that eye and it's still bloodshot. But when I was in there this day, a man walked in, a nice looking young man, two beautiful little kids. Little girl about 3, a little boy about 2, and the little girl raced over to the book display, and there was a book called Bible Story. And she picked up this book and she ran back to the dad, and she was expecting she was going to get a story out of the book. And Dad looked at the book and he said to this little girl, that is church stuff, and we don't look at church stuff. I felt sad. Would you? Terribly sad. We don't look at church stuff. Have we given God a bad name? I don't know where this saying came from, but I found it recently and it's not original, but I like it. It is okay if people don't like you, or even go further, it's okay if people hate you because of Jesus. But it is not okay if they hate Jesus because of you, because of me. I don't know what could have been done for that poor fellow, But he obviously hated anything to do with Jesus. Now go back to this Haman fellow again. Last time I mentioned about his greed and how he couldn't be satisfied with everything he had because there's one thing he couldn't have, and that was the worship of Mordecai. You know, I'd like to suggest that the Bible principle is a good one, that we ought to be content with what we've got. His wife says to him, come on, let's gather around, have an appetizer before you go. This gallows is up there, is it? Make this, where are we up to? Oh, they don't know where the gallows has gone. It's back in there somewhere, you'll come to it. Chapter 6. He's built the gallows. Haman doesn't like this Mordecai fella. And the king is as happy as Larry going to bed, but he can't sleep. Not a wink can he sleep. Now then, you're the king, men. What will you call for? The dancing girls? Will you call for the trickster? What would you get? Now, I'm quite confident there's not one of you here would call for musty old history books. Would you? And what did the king call for? History books. Where did they open the history books up to? The very story where Mordecai had saved his life. The king said, man alive, what did we do? What happened to that fellow? Where is he? What did we do for him? You know, after that, we've never done anything for him. He still sits out there. What? The king cannot understand. He cannot fathom his own ingratitude. Just then he hears a noise. The noise is outside. Who's that out there? It's Haman, sir. Haman? What's Haman want? Haman, come in. And Haman is brought in, and the king immediately says to him, Haman, what should I do to the man that I'm the most in the world, the person I want to honor, the person I'd like to revere? Now, Haman, I said before, he had eye trouble. He had more eyes than a potato. You know, he was just full of eyes. Eye. Who would the king want to honor more than me? I would love to be king. Even if I'd only be king for one day, I'd love to be king. Let me be king. And so he said, listen, why don't we get the royal robe, the royal horse, the royal servant, get everything and dress him up and send him out, yelling out, this is what the king does to the people that he likes to honor. The king thought, man, this is a good idea. Excellent idea, Haman. Go and do everything you've said, letter for letter, word for word, to Mordecai the Jew. Go and do it to Mordecai the Jew. Oh, by the way, Haman, what did you come here for? What did you want? No, it doesn't matter. Let me do this. Away he went. He wanted to get out of that place. Away he went. He did exactly what he did. He went home to his family. And when he got home to his family, he said, listen. And he told them what had happened. And his wife listened to her encouragement now. Toward the end of chapter 6, he said, if you've started to fall before this bloke, you will continue to fall. You'll go down. You'll go out. Haman. By the way, and then there was a knock at the door. It's lunchtime. The party's ready. Oh, okay, so he quickly dressed up, chapter 7. He quickly dressed up, raced out to the party with Esther and the king again. And the king said, Esther, tell me now, what is it you really want? It's not parties. What have you got in the back of your head? Come on, tell me what you want. Well, you just have to picture the scene as best you can, because I can't. I reckon there's a fair bit of emotion in that voice when she started to talk. Please, King, save us. If we were sold as slaves, I would shut up. It's not worth bringing such a minor matter to the king. But we are sold to death. We are sold to be killed. We are sold to be annihilated. We are sold to be... What are you talking about? Well, who's done this? The enemy is this wicked Haman. Wicked Haman. Man, what a scene. The king went out to turn into the garden. As he went out, Haman could see he was in real trouble now, and he fell. It says he fell. You can get and conjure up all the thinking or thoughts you might, because the king misconstrued his action. This fella on his wife. What? The king's angry now. Sir, last night he made a gallows. Did that gallows ever come up? Yeah, I thought it would. I knew we'd get to it. Make a gallows. He made a gallows. String him up! String him up! And Mordecai lived, and Haman was strung up on the gallows that was built that day. All right, quickly to finish the story. Esther was given all the property. Mordecai became prime minister. So I want to ask you some questions now. Why was Esther chosen queen? Why did Mordecai hear of the assassination attempt? Why was it written down in the history book and forgotten about? Why was it the king could not sleep? How come the night he couldn't sleep, they opened the history books and read the very story about Mordecai saving his life? You see, we don't see God's face in this story at all. We don't see his name at all, do we? But can you see his hand? Can you see his hand there? All the way through, God never leaves his people. He is with them. Good times and bad. Free times and hard. Well, Diosi was just a young minister, and he had served his apprenticeship. He had been an intern for a couple of years, and now he was going out to his first church that he was going to take. And he came to my office and he asked me, he said, what should I do when I go out? He was going to a little island called Ulawa. That's east of, you know exactly where it is, don't you? East of Malata, a little bit north of, yeah. All right. He was going out there. We had a presence out there. On one end of the island, we had a little clinic. Little clinic, and the nurse was out there. And then down the other end of the island was the government section of the island, and they had a police force down there, and we had a little church block down there, and we wanted to open up the church down in this other end. And Diosi would travel between the two areas. He said to me, he said, what should I do when I get there? So I said, Diosi, why don't you go and first thing visit the chief in your area? Go down there and visit him. He's a big man. Make yourself known to him. Tell him who you are. Take out a couple of volleyball nets and a couple of volleyballs so that you can set up, on the churchyard and invite the kids to come in, etc. And make yourself known. Go down to the police force and meet the cops. Tell them who you are. It's better for you to be meeting them than for them come looking for you. And there's a clinic there. It's not our clinic. The government have got a clinic. Go down to the nurse and talk to the nurse and tell her who you are and that you'd be happy to be chaplain or anything, just the community things to do. Away he went down there. But he knew in the back of his mind what had happened just 3 or 4 months before. This was after Christmas, it was just before Christmas, the other thing had happened. We had a group of people there running an evangelistic program in this section of town, in this section of the island. And they had a well set out program. They had a generator. They were showing slides. They were showing little, we'd call them, what do you call those things anyhow? DVDs today. They were showing whatever it was. And people were coming. People were enjoying it. A lot of people were there. But in that area, there was a very dominant atheist. And he was a school teacher. He was a chain smoker, and he hated religion, and he hated God, and he hated Adventists. Well, these kids and 1 or 2 evangelists were running this program, and they'd been going for a week, 10 days, and then there was a disturbance out the front, and there was a big noise. And this fella came in with a mob of thugs. And they came straight down the front. They grabbed a blackboard and they just busted it over the pulpit. They yelled out, "Get out!" Well, they didn't have to yell twice. Everybody took off. Everybody knew them and everybody was out of that place. And now this story is in Diosi's mind. He knew that thing had just happened and he was asked to go there and be a young minister in that area. What could he do? He was there not more than a week. And the nurse came to him. She said, "Diosi, I've got a patient and I'd like you to come down and pray for him." "Oh, yes, I'd love to. That'd be very good." "Yeah, sure. Who is it?" This very bloke, this very person. So Diosi went out. He went over to his elder, told him the story, told him that they're going to pray for him. "Oh, yeah, we'll do that in prayer meeting. We'll have in prayer meeting. In fact, we could add a little bit to that prayer and say, God, give him a bit of punishment. Let him know that we..." Well, I don't think they did that, but I think they might have thought something like that, 3 days later, the nurse saw Diosi again. "Diosi, I asked you to come and pray for that man." Yes, we've been praying. We pray for him in prayer meeting. We pray for him in worship. "Oh, rubbish," she said. "I told you to come down here. You've got to come down to the clinic. You pray for that man at his presence." Okay. Diosi went down with all the fear and trembling. And when he got there, the fear and trembling left him. This bloke was so sick he couldn't even sit up. He had emphysema. He could breathe in and he couldn't breathe out. He was, oh man. So Diosi wasn't frightened of him anymore. And he sat down there and talked to him for a moment or two. And then he said, "Listen, I am the Seventh-day Adventist minister. I would like to pray for you. Can I say a prayer for you?" "Oh, please, you pray to us." "I want you to pray for me." And Diosi said, "I have never prayed more sincerely in my life." He prayed for this fellow. And then he left. The next day he was back again to pray for this fellow. And when he came back, he prayed again. And the third day, he came back the third day. And when he came back the third day, the fellow was sitting up on the side of his bed. He talked, he visited with him for a few minutes, had a prayer again, and the nurse followed him out. She said, "That fella has recovered so much that I think if we could get a boat, we could send him to Makira. He could go to the hospital, he'd get a lot better treatment." So Diosi left there, went down to the elder again. Diosi had a boat and he talked to the elder. Yeah, the elder, he could drive the boat because Diosi couldn't leave the island for a while. And the nurse had enough fuel. She could send them over to the hospital. So they went and got a couple of pallets and put them in the bottom of the boat, put some mats on it, and then they went and got this fellow and carted him down and put him on it and took off to drive down to Makira to get him to the hospital. Diosi had to go up to the other end of the island that day, and he was coming back the next day. And when he got back to his home... Now, before I say what happened... Many areas, many island groups, many languages do not have a word for thank you. No way. For example, you go to Guadalcanal and you are offered food and you don't eat it, you don't accept it. Have a guess what happens next time you go? You won't be offered. You won't be offered any. You get your own if that's the way you feel. Well, the word thank you is not known. They give gifts. Give a gift. Diosi came home the next morning and there at his house was a great stack of food. There was yam, there were taro, there was all sorts of things, and 2 chickens tied by the legs. There, right at his door. The best way, the biggest way, the greatest demonstration of friendship, of thank you. Who was it from? From this very family that had wanted to destroy before. You see, God's plans know no haste and they know no delay. Why are you here today? Who brought you here? I want to assure you that you are here because you're a son or you're a daughter of God. You are here not by chance. Chance is atheism. God has plans. May I assure you, you won't always see God's face in your Christian journey. But his hand is never far away. Why? For we walk by faith, not by sight. Amen.